welcome back. Rebel News Live. Once again, if you want to get your tickets, you can go to rebelnewslive.com to meet Tamara Leach and other great people either this week or next weekend in Calgary. All right, we have on Hatim. Is that how we pronounce your name?
Yeah, Hatim.
Hatim, yeah, a new lawyer, a new face on the show, basically, not a new lawyer, a new face on the show that's joining us tonight. He cross-examined the first panel of witnesses this morning from the finance ministry, finance department. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. I'm a lawyer with the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. I've been with them for a year now, dealing with, mostly COVID stuff has kind of been the big thing, but free speech cases as well.
Yeah. So you were granted standing in the Emergency Act Inquiry alongside the TDF. Is that right?
Yeah, we share standing. It's the Justice Center, the Democracy Fund, and Citizens for Freedom.
Great. And what is your main takeaway? Like, if you could summarize, give us a quick rundown of everything that happened today. We already heard Eva say, but from your perspective, what was the most important thing we heard today? What was your general impression of how it went today?
I think the biggest thing we heard was from Jody Thomas, who's the Prime Minister's National Security Intelligence Advisor. So far, she is the strongest support we've heard that there's actually a national security threat and that the Emergency Act was met. And yet she, under cross-examination by my colleague Rob Kittredge, agreed there was no serious violence. And although she argued about the definition being met, when it's broken down and it's actually put to her, she agrees that all the components weren't there.
Well, because it's one thing to claim violence is occurring, and then it's another to back that up and have actual evidence. I see that we have a clip here that we can go to right now, and we can take a look at that. Oh, okay. Well, never mind. We're not going to do that. But
yeah, we can get to it later. After.
Well, no, and it's exactly that. When you are proposing that something as serious as violence took place, and then you can't actually give proof, tangible evidence, because the narrative becomes broken down that easily. What's your opinion on stuff like that? We've been seeing that a lot, right? Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, I think there was a powerful moment where she was asked if there was serious violence. She said it depends on your definition. Yeah, violence was continuous throughout the protest. So then Rob asked her, okay, well, what was the violence?
Yeah.
And then she resorted back to honking, fumes. Maybe some people got harassed in the street, but certainly not a national security threat.
Definitely not. And it's the same rhetoric that we've heard. It's all the microaggressions of the supposed residents. Where I know some people are mad, but also keep in mind that hundreds and hundreds of residents in Ottawa actually housed the truckers and the supporters and provided them food and clothing and gave them a place to sleep. So we're not talking to any of those people, right? But microaggressions are a thing, right?
No, 100%. And, we don't have the clip of your cross-examination of the witnesses this morning. Can you give us, once again, a quick rundown of how that went? What basically was the main takeaway from that cross-examination by you specifically?
Yeah, so the big point that I think I was getting at and that I think came out was that what exactly made this behavior something that should make people subject to having their accounts frozen? And so the witnesses talked about the idea that, oh, well, you know what, there's a gap in the legislation. It didn't apply to funding, so that's what we did.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to clarify that that's not the only gap. I mean, the donated funds would go through a bank account anyways. The real issue is that the Proceeds of Crime, Money Laundering, and Financing Terrorism Act doesn't apply because there was no terrorism, there was no money laundering, and they weren't the proceeds of crime. What made this conduct illegal was the fact that the government declared it illegal.
Yeah.
And so I asked the panel about, this is a new area of conduct that was defined by these regulations. And the response was, well, but it was illegal conduct. Well, what made it illegal? Yeah. The regulations made it illegal.
Yeah, the Emergency Act that were invoked right after you said it was illegal, right? That's right. Talking about, bank account frozen and GoFundMe funds frozen and donations funds frozen. Let's take a look at clip number 4, where it's basically Deputy Minister of Finance, Michael Sabia, who said to the commission that there were, quote unquote, no accounts frozen. Very weird to hear that. Let's take a look at that.
Individuals who had their accounts seized and subsequently those accounts were released to them, nonetheless have had lingering effects on their credit history because of missed payments.
But you're talking about people here that were involved in unlawful activities.
Well, ma'am, that's not true. I mean, I think you've just said yourself that it was donors
To our knowledge, no donors were affected by this, the order.
There were no accounts frozen, to the best of our knowledge, based on the information that we've received. There were no accounts from donors that were frozen.
And the long-term effects on credit histories, that's not something that concerns you at all?
I think that's an issue for I think that's an issue for the financial institutions and how the financial institutions administer these things.
So, you know, you work in finance and it's your job supposedly to know these things. And again, it's that hot potato that we've seen that's just been thrown in another direction because no one wants to take responsibility for the part that they played in the invocation, the unjust invocation of the Emergencies Act, I might add. What was your takeaway from that? Like, what was it to, we were all there in the commission today, but to hear that again, what do you think of it?
Well, there was a big issue that came up under a few different cross-examinations about the issue of freezing donors' accounts. Well, they say that was never our intention, but they're the ones who put the input to actually get these orders drafted. And the way they're drafted, they apply to donors. And even more than that, they put a duty on banks to make sure that they have no dealings with donors. So that, and on top of that, you know, there's a bit of a contradiction there because he said that earlier in their testimony, they said they didn't get specific information on bank accounts being frozen. They got some general stats, but they don't know individual people's accounts were frozen. So he's saying that they don't know of any donors' accounts were frozen, but they wouldn't know that anyways because, I mean, you called it a hot potato and that's a good image because, you know, they made the regulations. They hand that power off to the RCMP. The RCMP makes a list of people. They hand that off to the banks. And then the banks are responsible for the last step. And each, you know, between the RCMP and the Department of Finance, each of them can say it wasn't me.
Exactly. And, you know, there was actually a document that was brought up today as well. It was what the RCMP actually used to be able to conduct their investigations and to be able to write down the relevant information to be able to vet these people prior to their accounts being frozen. And we don't even know who made the document because no one would take responsibility. In fact, all three people in that panel actually said that they had never seen that document before. And they're the ones that created the legislation to actually be able to freeze people's accounts. I mean, Miss Jacques in particular, I found her, if I can be so bold as to say, definitely the weak link in that panel of three, because anything that she couldn't actually retort or dance around as well as the others, we saw Sabia come in and say for each and every single time, redirecting her questions. And so she is the one primarily that deals with creating those policies. And the fact that her answer was like, I have no idea what's going on. What is your job?
Well,
what is your job, man?
I think that's the whole thing. That's the whole point of the inquiry. Move away the responsibility from yourself to someone else. The Department of Finance, the Ministry of Finance said it wasn't our responsibility. It was the private banks. It was the private entities. It wasn't us. It was Interact. It wasn't. But you're the one who enacts the law in order to allow that to happen. I mean,
hot potato.
Am I wrong?
No. Yeah, I think that's it, and it's. I mean, part of it's just figuring out who did what, and because there's so many people that were involved in the various decisions that were made, and each person can limit themselves to their little piece and then absolve themselves of responsibility. I mean, one of the issues that was coming up around the advice about whether or not this was a national security threat is that each department can say, we were asked what powers we would use if the Emergencies Act gets invoked. But it seems that very few, if any, people were actually tasked with the big question, should we invoke the Emergencies Act?
Yeah, exactly. Anything else to add there?
Well, I think we pretty much summed up how it went for the morning, for the first panel of witnesses. Moving on to Jody Thomas, now the second witness of the day. Let's start off with a clip. Let's go with clip number 10. The commission quoted a transcript of the understandings from the National Security Intelligence, highlighting to Jody Thomas, that she, quote unquote, learned from the Coots arrest from the media and not the RCMP. So this high level government official took some of her information instead of going with the RCMP from the media. Very, very interesting.
Some intelligence agent, huh?
Yeah.
Clarified that neither you nor your staff receives SITREPs, so situation reports, project reports, or other forms of information directly. And as you mentioned today, you hadn't heard of Project Hendon specifically. And if we just scroll down a little bit, it also says there that you learned of the Coutts arrests through the media, not directly from the RCMP. And just scrolling down a little bit again, sharing among all three levels of government and information and intelligence in relation to the convoy could have been better. So I'll just ask you to elaborate a little bit on where you think the deficiencies are and what maybe can be or should be done about them. Because as you know, the Commission has a sort of a forward-looking mandate as well as a backward-looking one. So
I think when we are looking at primarily open source information as opposed to investigation-specific information, so let's draw a line there. The RCMP is investigating person X for having done something criminal. As the NSIA, should I receive that? No.
What'd you make of this?
I mean, in a sense, I think she has a good point. So during Brendan Miller's cross-examination, he got an important point where her position is not made by an act of parliament. It's made by a policy of the Prime Minister.
Right.
Her job is basically to assemble the information that's coming from the different agencies and funnel that up to the Prime Minister. But where that becomes an issue is where she's the strongest support for the Emergencies Act. And so it really does matter what information she had available to her. And in this case, it seems like, I mean, there's a limitation to what she's getting from the RCMP. Other than that, kind of her biggest source of information would be something like CSIS, who we've seen from the documents. We haven't heard from them yet. But we've seen from the documents, they don't think that there was a security threat there's a threat to the security of Canada present. And it's under the CSIS Act that definition exists for the Emergencies Act. So they're presumably the experts on the issue. Yeah,
I was trying to find a document. Unfortunately, I can't find it, but it is true that earlier today we saw a document where CSIS said that according to their view, the Freedom Convoy was not a national security issue. And my question that I had for that witness, Jody Thomas, was, if CSIS is saying that, why are you saying otherwise? Why are you completely disregarding what they are saying? And I think your testimony answered why. She doesn't seem to value CSIS's intelligence a lot. She didn't seem to value CSIS a lot. When she was talking about the reasons to invoke the Emergencies Act, when she was talking about a threat to national security, she would say that Section 2 of the CSIS Act wasn't the only thing that we should rely on, even though that's literally what the EA is based on. Section 2 of the CSIS Act, and whether or not we had other options apart from that. I don't think that she valued CSIS intelligence a lot. I mean,
well, really, I just think, again, it speaks to her position. I mean, if you were unaware or you didn't see my live tweets today, she came upon that position with zero prior police experience, unlike the people before her that filled that position as well. And she started 2 weeks before the convoy. So you have a woman that is kind of learning as she goes. And that was something that she actually confirmed during her testimony as well, that she just kind of learned as she went. But as her title would portray, advisor to national security. That's a really big job. That's a really big role. So, I mean, again, I think it's pretty simple why she couldn't fill that position, why she couldn't trust CSIS when CSIS has been around for how long and you've had that position for 9 months. It's pretty apparent to me she's incompetent. This is Trudeau's Canada, and we just need to reshuffle the deck a bit.
No, totally. All right. Well, thanks so much for coming on today. Any last words for us about, once again, anything that we should take away from today's proceedings at the Commission?
I'd say optimism. I think the inquiry is doing a really good job at revealing the truth and getting to the bottom of things, and it's very illuminating having the people who are at the center of this whole event that took Canada and the world by storm, and having them answer questions under cross-examination.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
And if you guys want to see more of his cross-examination, you can always tune in on our daily live stream where we basically look at all of the Commission unedited. All right, let's go to a quick ad break, and when we come back, we will welcome Tom Morazzo, Freedom Convoy, according to his LinkedIn profile, intern on the live stream, to talk to us about what he saw today. Let's take a quick break.